Hello. Let's make sure this is correct. Hey guys. So recently I was chatting to a friend about different people's heights. And because we're in Ireland, as people usually do, we were talking about height in feet and inches. And then we started thinking, why do we still use feet and inches? It's an antiquated system. It doesn't even make any sense. Like, why don't we use the metric system like we do for pretty much everything else? Because we're not a backward country. America. So we started thinking about different units and different ways of measuring things. And this is something I've always found quite interesting. And there's quite a lot of history to it. Like, we didn't always have a standardized system. And this kind of makes sense. Because millennia ago, people didn't have the technology and the techniques to measure things as accurately as we do now. Like, the first attempt of an international standardized measurement length was in France in the 18th century. And they decided to make a meter 1/10,000,000th of the distance a quarter of the circumference of the Earth, so the distance from the North Pole to the equator. And they tried to measure that, and they didn't do too bad. They got it quite accurate. I mean, we have it more accurate now. But other systems they used in different civilizations kind of had their own standardization in different places. And they weren't always based on things like measuring the Earth, because that's quite difficult to do if you live in ancient Rome or ancient Egypt. They were measured on things that they just had to hand, literally. So measurements were based on body parts mainly. So there was in ancient Egypt, and in some other places, there was a cubit, which is the distance from a man's elbow to the tip of the middle finger. Now, I'm going to say man's for most of these, because that's what they always, define them as. And a cubit was 2 hand spans. A hand span is kind of what it sounds like, the span of your hand from the thumb to your little pinky. So a cubit is about 2 hand spans. Guys, feel free to get to know your neighbour, measure up, see how you measure up. Do this. Is it the same as your neighbour's cubit? Who's bigger? Who's better? So we also are aware of a foot. Everybody's heard of a foot. This kind of comes from Rome and Greek, things like that. And again, it's the measurement of a foot. Now, I took some measurements myself at home, and it turns out I'm slightly lacking. My foot is only about 24 centimetres. It should be about 30. My hand span is a bit lacking as well. A hand span also, so a hand span is 2 cubits. A cubit was 6 palms in ancient Egypt, which is your palm width. A palm width made up of 4 digits. Somehow I managed to measure my hand span as 7.5 centimetres, and each of my digits is 1.5. So I don't know, I got a bit of extra there. But at some point then, they needed to standardize things. Because, I mean, if you're making a table at home, it's fine if you use your own cubits and hand spans, because it'll all be relative, and you could have a table 2 cubits tall and 4 cubits wide, and that'd be fine. But if you want to make something like, a pyramid, you don't really want all the millions of different people working on it to use their own cubits, because it might be a bit lopsided. So they did standardize that. They had a royal cubit, which instead of being 6 palms, like everybody else's cubit, was 7 palms, and that was the royal cubit, supposedly based on the pharaoh. So I don't know if he was overcompensating or what. But then they did make a standard of that. So they actually, had this bar is a royal cubit, and made copies of it and handed them out to all the masons and people who are building. So that's why we have those nice straight pyramids that are still there. In other parts of the world, there were standardizations as well, but there were kind of just pockets of them. And like I mentioned, the first time that they tried to kind of have a overall international standard was in France in the 18th century, because people started sort of, trading and talking with each other. And there were quite complicated ways. They were always kind of different in different places. To measure the volume of something, like a volume of a jar, they'd fill it with seeds and then count the seeds. And that sounds really tedious. And in London, or in the UK, sorry, not just London, there was a foot as well, but that was slightly different to what would have been a Roman foot or a Greek foot. And they had the inch, which some people define as the thumb, so kind of from your knuckle to the tip of your thumb. That's supposed to be about an inch, and there's 12 of those in a foot. The inch in the UK was defined as 3 grains of barley, dried and round, placed together. And I mean, it's not that standard, is it? So now we do have a much more standard system. And also the units for these different systems are very strange. I mean, there's 12 inches in a foot, 2 handspans in a cubit, 6 palms in a cubit, 4 digits in a cubit, 24 digits in a cubit. No, 4. Oh, you see, it's really confusing. And how many yards are in a mile? Anyone? Yeah, exactly. How many meters are in a kilometre? Yeah, so much simpler. All you have to do is remember different units of 10. We can get millimeters and nanometers, and because we can measure things much more accurately, we can measure down to the atomic scale with nanometers and things like that, and it's brilliant. But obviously it's a lot more difficult to kind of make that. So they did standardize it, like I was saying. So they actually made a meter, and this is the meter that everything else is measured by. But obviously things erode, and that doesn't last very long. So now the meter is properly defined as the distance light travels in about 1/300 millionth of a second in vacuum, which everyone can just do so easily. So that's perfect. But we do have also kind of have standardized these other ancient ones. So a cubit is supposed to be about 45 centimeters. Again, I'm not quite there. I'm about 43. But I have, if anybody wants to kind of see how they measure up, we have a meter marked out here on the floor, and you can see if your feet. So it's supposed to be maybe about 3 feet, 3 and a bit feet for the meter. So I don't know. I'm not quite there. 1, 2, 3. Definitely 4 or more. Anybody else? Can we get 3 people up to lay out their feet? Kevin, you want to come up? Anyone else? Okay, we need one more person. So if you even just put 3 different people's feet. Okay, here's about a foot. Here's about a foot. Okay, cool. 1, 2, 3. Okay, maybe it is a man's foot. Is 12 inches. Maybe that is more accurate if you include the shoe. But yeah, well, I mean, I just think that's something that is kind of interesting, looking at the history of these things and how we can improve on them, and we have. And not, I mean, I haven't, but other people have. And it's great that we do that, and then we can go on and do things more accurately and better, and we can just measure distances in space and volumes. And time is quite an interesting one. So we've metricized or decimalized pretty much everything now. And not that everybody embraces that system, but most people do. And we have length, volume. Time, however, is still a bit weird. It's done in 12s, like 12 hours in a day, and mostly 60s. So why haven't we changed that? I have no idea why we haven't changed that. But it comes from ancient Babylonians. I mean, why did they measure things in 12s? They don't have 12 fingers or anything. But what they did was they used to count on their fingers, and they used to count each segment of their finger. So 3 times on each finger. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up. So you have 12, and then that's 1 12. Then you go again. So you get 5 12s, and that's 60. So that's how we measure time, and they divided the circle into 360 degrees and different radians, and some reason that's still around today. I don't know if that'll ever change, because it is standard internationally, which is fine, because we all know what everyone's talking about, but it's kind of not that intuitive and a bit difficult to learn when you're starting out. So, I mean, we could maybe decimalize time. It could be tricky, but we could do it. So I wonder if we ever will. That's pretty much it. Thanks, guys.